Hey gang, it's Baileywiki. It's been a while since I first introduced you to Moulinette, many of you at least. And at the time, I said it would be one of the most important modules in the Foundry community. Well, it's been over a year now since I did my last tutorial, and Moulinette has expanded quite a bit, not only in terms of features and improvements, but also in terms of just number of artists and content creators that are now on the Moulinette platform. So why is it important, right? If you don't know this already, Moulinette is for Foundry, kind of like Google is for the internet, right? So it's your index and your browser into all of your owned content with just a button click, and it's all inside of Foundry itself, right? So it's like the best and easiest and most helpful place for it to be. So this includes all of your locally stored content, like audio and maps and tiles and tokens, but also all of the content from artists that you support, including all their entire libraries of content in the cloud, even content from artists that you don't yet support. So it's all instantly searchable, and you just drag and drop it into your Foundry world. So Moulinette also offers lots of other features around this basic function, right? So this idea of putting everything within one or two clicks away is powerful for DMs. And just the free Moulinette is worth having installed if you have any size of libraries of stuff, or if you use any of the free modules that are published out there in the Foundry community. But there's also a premium version of Moulinette called Moulinette Cloud that does quite a bit more, and more has been added here in the last year. So this is going to be a full updated tutorial for those of you who don't yet know Moulinette. And for those of you who do, I'm going to try to hit on the new things with each section so you can use the timestamps and their titles to sort of navigate around to what's new. But quick preview here, we now have upgraded the ability to add custom sources to our index. We have new search tools. We have new UI and just quality of life upgrades. And then there's even a Moulinette store. And there's even actually an integration with Roll20, if you can believe that. So this tutorial is primarily for DMs, but it's also for content creators who are looking for maybe a better way or more ways to get your content distributed, and things that also make it more consumable and more easily accessed within Foundry. Because that's, as a content creator, I care that my stuff can be found easily, and Foundry doesn't really have the best native tools to do that. So I think Moulinette bridges that gap. Even for content creators who just want to create a better quality of life for their subscribers. So let's get started with the free Moulinette, and we'll jump into the premium after that. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Okay, so let's start with what free Moulinette offers you. This will index your local assets, including tiles, tokens, sounds, and even scenes. You can also get the free image search and icon search with the free Moulinette. And you basically just install Moulinette Core, which is kind of the main thing you need to install, and then you decide which of the other asset modules that you want to use. So we're going to install all of them today. And once installed, just activate them in your world, and then you'll click this little hammer icon to basically activate it. Before we start, we're just going to look really quick at the Moulinette settings. Most of these you can leave on by default. If you don't want to see or interact with anything on the cloud side, which is premium stuff, you can turn that off. You can turn on or off showcased content. Auto scrolling will be off by default. I turned it on so I could show you today what that looks like. It will show you whether an asset is in the cloud or local pretty distinctly, just using default. It does have a high contrast version as well. You can browse by different modes, by creator, by pack. I recommend by creator. And then you have subcontrols. That just means that Moulinette may introduce its own subcontrols in these different layers. You can turn those off if you want to sort of decrease clutter in general on your control side. And then once you get used to Moulinette, you can create the compact view. Will go by default today. There also is a file picker that you can replace your current file picker with. I haven't really played with that. You're welcome to try. If you are on Amazon, you can use S3 buckets, and we'll talk about some of that stuff here in a little bit. You do have some specific settings for some of the specific modules. So like image search, if you want to use that, which we won't go into today, but it's pretty cool. You do have to generate either a Bing or Google search API to be able to use it. So it's relatively advanced. We'll leave that for those of you who want to read the documentation. The sounds and soundboard, it's also really helpful. You can change some of the ways that the soundboard presents itself. And for the tile module, if you do plan on working with prefabs, I have a lot of prefabs. I have like thousands of them. You can tick this on if you get any problems with those prefabs importing. They generally should work if you're on D&D 5e, but if you're not, if you're on another system, you probably want to tick this on. And what it does is just cleans the, prefabs all work with a control token. So it just cleans all of the meta information off that token so that it can be used in other game systems. And then you'll also, if you want to use some of the more advanced macros, when you drop tiles, you can apply macros. You're going to want to create a new compendium to be able to house those. I just created one and called it Moulinette. And then you can put into that compendium a number of special macros that you'll want to use. In this case, I have a free nuts and bolts module that you can install. And if you just search for Moulinette, you can find these already made Moulinette macros. We'll slide those in there. I'll show you those here in a second, but this is where you set up where to look for those. That's it for the global settings. Now let's look at the UI. So first, just to orientate you on the tools here, we do have Patreon integration. If you click on that, I'm not going to connect yet because I'm going to show you the free version, but this is where you do it. You can always reload data and reindex from here. And this is where you get to some of these specific modules. You can also open up favorites, which is super handy. If you click on it, it shows you maybe some of the items that you used in the past, or if you've marked something as a favorite, you can access it pretty quickly from here, and you've got some subtools underneath it. You also have the faceted search, which I'll show you in a bit. That comes with the cloud integration, but for right now, let's just jump into the basics. We'll just open up the tiles. You notice if you click on any of those, it just takes you to the right tab within Moulinette. Just to kind of scan through these, icons is something that I find very helpful. Let's say, for example, I have this macro here. Let's see what this macro does. All right, so this adjusts token magic effects. So maybe I want something that's like settings, an icon that would look like settings. And maybe I like this one. And notice here, it'll make the foreground green and the background will be transparent. You could set that to something else. You have other color presets. Let's go ahead and make this. So notice the path was copied to my clipboard automatically just by left clicking it. So if I right click my macro, go to edit and go up here and click that, and then I just hit Control A and Control V, I just pasted that path in here. It gave me a nice custom macro image. Super helpful, quick, and easy, and you can use it all the time if you want to give your macros a little bit of style. Image search we won't go into, but this is where if you had applied a Google search or Microsoft Bing search API, you can just do searches on the internet and be able to pull those into your game. Prefabs is something that is a premium feature. It doesn't generally work with free. I think just the prefabs that I've got available for free will in fact work. So you can play around with them here. If I choose Baileywiki, these are prefabs that are available in my free module. And if you grab one of these, you have to have Token Attacher installed. Token Attacher is what makes prefabs work. So once you have that installed, you can drag this into a scene. Give it some time to populate. It's downloading any of the assets that actually make this particular asset work. And then if I drag a player in there, this has got levels and walls and all sorts of other things. It's got lighting installed on it. And you can see we are in this, in this building and exploring around, and that's how that works. Scenes lets you look at scenes that you might have access to. Again, in the free version, you can see some of the sample scenes here. But I want to show you something, and this is what's new since I've showed you last, is you can now go down to that little gear icon in any one of these, and you can configure different sources. So you can see here, I actually have the Tom Kartos Ostenwald module installed. I installed it it's a free module that Tom Kartos publishes. It's in the module directory. You can see it right here. But that module is not automatically searchable or indexed by Moulinette. So I came in here and I added a custom source, and I just came in here to pick folder, go over to our user data section. I went into modules, went all the way down to Tom Kartos Ostenwald, select maps, because that's where all of his maps are, and I selected that directory. I said these are scenes, which is the only option here in this tab. And then I just said Tom Kartos, and I just gave it a name, Ostenwald, and I added that source, and that's what created this source here for me. I can go back into the source later and update it. But once you do that, if you then click index scenes, it will crawl through that module. Even though that module creator didn't make it to be crawled through for you, it will do that. And so that's how you can add scenes and other things. Notice I can do the same thing with sounds. I can go to configure sources, and hopefully I'll fix this here in one of these releases, but I realized that my sounds were not being indexed by automatically by Moulinette. So I just came in here, I went to this data path, which is here. So I went to towns, sounds, and I have tons of stuff in this directory. And I just selected this directory, said Baileywiki, what pack it was in, and then that added it. And this little symbol of the person means that you added it yourself. It's not automatic. I'll show you some automatic sources here in a second. And then once you add it, you can see all of the sounds here. And there's a bunch of great ways to listen and add these things, bookmark them. It's a great bunch of little tools here. You can also search by folder in case you like the path and that you find that more helpful than just the whole list. And then, of course, you can just have thumbnails. You can, which is also new, shrink and grow the UI as much as you want to. And then within a particular view, if there's thumbnails to look at, for example, we'll look at some of mine. You can increase or decrease the size of the thumbnail. Some people like to see everything on one screen. Some people like to be able to zoom in and see the artwork. Let's look at some of the sources for these images here. Because for the free one, you're going to want to use this a lot. This is where you can get tokens and all of your tile artwork. So you notice here I have some sources that I've added manually. And I also have sources that were added automatically. So most of my modules, and we'll add here the rest of these, I have some of these added manually, they automatically have in their script the ability to tell Moulinette to crawl them and to index them. So you can see all of my different paid modules, they all are automatically crawled by Moulinette. Some of them I choose to ignore, like my 3D module. I don't really care to see that. Those assets, there's another browser in 3D Canvas that lets you browse assets. So I hide those from this view. But you can see I have some sources from Keora, right? So I have Keora's free module, and it's just module / Keora maps, tokens, assets. That's the one. And then that particular artist publishes tiles, tokens, and some other things. So I wanted to add those as well. And I just added those as, tile images from Keora, and those bring those into my free assets that come up when I browse them. So now if I do a search for orc, I can see a lot of the new orcish elements from my recent release. Furniture and tables and tents and tent tops and things like that. Some other search elements that are new here is you can turn off fuzzy matching. So if I turn this off, it will search only for the specific word. So this is helpful when you're searching for things like male and you don't want to have female come up, right? So these are all male tokens that I have access to. Notice here's my female water weird from Keora now. If I close this submenu down here, you can also see this is added. There are 1,408 assets matching your criteria from Moulinette Cloud. This is helpful for you if you're looking for assets that you don't necessarily own yet. If you click that, you can see the nature of the assets that you might be interested in. You can click them open and kind of see, who the artist was, what level that you would need to subscribe to in order to get access to this. So this is just very helpful if you're trying to discover more content and you have something very specific that you're looking for. This is literally like all of the entire libraries of all of the artists that are currently on Moulinette. And one other upgrade to search is you can also search by regular expression in the search field. Again, that's more advanced, but for those of you who know what regular expressions are, it does support that. So let's say that you have assets that are local assets that you also want to include. Well, those are easy to add also. So let's say I'm in the tiles and tokens. I want to go into configure sources. And in this case, I have some custom sources, some custom assets from Dungeon Quill, right? Dungeon Quill is a great artist, has about 30,000 assets, tons and tons of stuff. And these are a lot of tile-based stuff that you can drag into your scenes, right? So if I want to add Dungeon Quill, I can go in here and I've already downloaded the Dungeon Quill assets. And where they go to is when you install Moulinette for the first time, it creates the special folder inside of your user data folder. So you're used to your worlds folder, your modules folder, probably your assets. In this case, it creates a Moulinette folder. And then within Moulinette, it creates all these subfolders. And here it created one for tiles. And there's some that it starts to populate these with things as you as you use the system. But in this case, it always has a custom folder, and in there you can put any custom asset. So I created a new folder called Dungeon Quill, and then I just dragged Dungeon Quill's one of that creator's packs into that folder. And just by putting things into these custom folders, Moulinette will automatically index them and make them searchable. But it also, as you saw, lets you add any other folder. So I could go into like my world folder if I had things sitting in my world, and I could add, assets from that world folder, and those would be indexed as well by Moulinette. Now, if you want to have index assets that are not necessarily in your Foundry data folder, you can do that using symbolic links, and that is documented in Moulinette. You can see if you've never used symbolic links, be careful, it gets into more advanced stuff. I won't go into that today, but you can see documentation and look at what it takes to create symbolic links so that you can have Moulinette crawl things that are elsewhere on your hard drive, not necessarily in Foundry. Now, more things on the UI that are new. I mentioned that you do have shortcuts. So let's say that you wanted to sort of have all of my stuff ready to search. You can create the search in any way that you want, and then click on this shortcut bookmark, and we'll actually give you the code to create a macro. In fact, you can just create the macro from here, and you can drag it, or you can drag this one directly into your toolbar, right? You can also create the code to access the macro from a journal entry. So now if I click on this, it opens up to that view that I was just in. So really, whatever search and filter criteria you want, you can save it as a shortcut there. You can also right-click and you can favorite items, and those will show up then in your favorites tab. And finally, when you open it up, you can see a more detailed thumbnail on anything that you happen to be looking at. If you are subscribed to the cloud, you can also get more meta information and categorization. You can actually even contribute to these to this information as well if you want to help the Moulinette community sort of index things better. Because right now it only is able to look at whatever keywords that are involved in the file path or the file name itself that the creator might have used. I also want to talk briefly about these sort of drop helpers that you see mentioned here. Let's look up an asset that we think we want to drop in. Let's look up an Orcish chair. There's a couple from my recent release. Okay, so these chairs, these happen to be, if you look at it, it's 200 DPI, and you can set now a DPI threshold, or you can even make a custom DPI here in case your creators use 120 or something like that. But we'll call this a 200 DPI, and we'll drop in a chair. So now we've got this chair, and there's other things that we can do with it. You guys saw in one of these before how you can modify these, and you do those with these macros. Now what it has is, remember that Moulinette macro compendium we set up earlier. We put these special effects in here. That's what these are. So if we want this chair to be a ghostly chair, and we can select more than one of these, we can go ahead and apply that. And now if we drag that chair out, oh, this was the throne. Sorry, let's drag out one of these chairs. You can see it's got this ghostly effect, right? So that's how you can use some of these drop helpers to work with Moulinette. You can also drop it in as an article, so it'll actually make a journal entry for you, or you can drop it in as a token in case you have a big token set. You can drop those in here as well. Just keep in mind that with these macros, they do have some special language, and this may change over time. But if I open up one of these, you can see at the very end, this is really just a token magic effects filter, but at the end, it's got this sanity check code added. You just need to add this code to anything that you want to work with this Moulinette system. At least as of right now, I've been talking to the developer about potentially eliminating that. So depending on when you watch this, you can experiment with which macros are working and kind of check out what you need to do from there. And the last thing I'll show you here is you also have the ability to drop in random assets. So let's say that I wanted to drop in these pieces of furniture sort of randomly. I can click this button here. So if you just get your search results down to just what you see here, it'll randomly place those. Helpful if you're placing rocks, trees, bushes, chairs, things like that. Okay, so now that we've seen the free Moulinette, let's look at what you get if you're a subscriber at the cloud service. First, you're going to end up authenticating on your Patreon. And it takes you to an outside website, which I won't show here, but it's pretty easy, just gives you a accept button. Once that's done, you can come back in here. And it gives you now all of the different Patreons that you're supporting. Now, if we open up again, we go to like Prefabs, for example. Now I can see all of the things that I have access to. These aren't just Patreons that I support. These are also creators that have offered free assets for Moulinette that you can access here as well. Notice I've got almost 3,400 prefabs, and everyone else is, maybe the double digits. That's why if you're going to use my prefab system in Moulinette, you probably want to be on the cloud. What it does is it's just smarter and it has more capabilities to digest my module and understand the prefabs, and it can do that within the cloud a lot easier. If I search for camp, I can drag out a prefab. And I basically have an instant camp on any scene that I want. I can go inside these tents, and that's kind of how that works. It's also important that if you're going to use modular scenes like mine, many of mine are built. So I have about 500 scenes, but many of them are modular. And the free version doesn't let you really browse and look at these in terribly helpful ways. This version does. You get a bigger thumbnail. When you click on it, it shows you in more detail like what's actually going on in the scene. So yeah, if you're going to use my stuff and you want to use Moulinette, the cloud-based version gives you a lot more capability there. You just open it up, click import scene. It will start the process of downloading any of the assets that make that scene run, and it'll put it into a new folder over here called Moulinette. Once it's all loaded, we can open that scene up and view it. Let all the rest of these assets load in. we've got a nice elf tavern that we can explore. Also important, if you are using the cloud version, you can use it in conjunction with your local assets. You just see local assets are in black, cloud assets are in orange. Okay, so the last thing I'll show you that's available with Moulinette Cloud is what's called Faceted Search. I frankly would love to see this available even for free users, just to show you, be able to let you see what is out there in the world that you might want to be accessing. But right now, when you open it up, these are all things that are premium content, right? So it's some kind of premium content from different creators, and you can see you have a ton of different options to, be able to go right down to a very specific creator and see what they offer. So it's great just for browsing, but you can also just look for things that you want, right? So if I wanted to see other orcish type of things, I can see other creators that might have things like orcs. Great stuff from Tom Kartos here. Lots and lots of assets and maps that all might help you expand your game if you're doing something in the orcish type world. Notice Tom Kartos has some great empty maps that you can then build a lot of things on top of with tons of assets. So I subscribe to Tom. I think that his assets is just so complete, such a complete set. And I've done overviews of Tom Kartos in the past. But this makes it really easy to see everything that he's got and then decide also if you want to support that creator. I did want to mention all of the new creators that are on Moulinette now. You can see it's a pretty big list, and you've got some pretty prolific creators, right? Like Mad Cartographer, Venitus Maps, Tom Kartos, all with lots and lots of assets. You got myself on there. So it's great to see more creators coming on board. I think they recognize that this is really kind of the best experience for them to have their stuff be able to be accessible within Foundry. You can dig into these creators, and you can even see what kinds of assets do they have. And it's even, some of them even have their assets for sale. I haven't turned that on yet because I just found out about it. But you can search for assets across creators and find just the things that you're looking for. Now, the last thing I'll show you, you haven't seen much from me before, but this is a Roll20 map. I don't ever use Roll20. I do still have an account. The thing I really, really want to show you, I can't because Roll20 is so hard to use. I can't free up space with my audio. So unfortunately, all I can show you is like what this thing kind of looks like. But if you have Roll20 open, there's a new Moulinette browser plugin for Firefox and Chrome. You can find it on their respective app stores, or just Google Moulinette Plugin Roll20 and you'll find it. Once you go to options, you can enable, there will be a screen here where you can actually connect it to your Patreon. You come back into Roll20, and when you click on that, it brings up all of your assets that you have access to. So here I've connected it. Maybe I want to do something sci-fi. So I've got my hellscape assets, and it lets you just drag any of the assets. You can do a search just like you're used to with Moulinette. You just drag your asset right onto your Roll20 canvas, and you're rocking and rolling. It's obviously very bare bones, but I mean, Roll20 as a platform is fairly bare bones. But this is just super helpful if you do subscribe to a lot of Patreons and you haven't been able to like have this kind of index and drop in, easy drop in functionality. This is a pretty nice to have. It also, if you are a Roll20 user and you've wanted to use my stuff, there hasn't really been an easy way to get my stuff into Roll20. This is your way to do that. But like I said, I can't do it because I have all this audio and there's no way to mass delete it. And I wasn't going to go through the pain of manually deleting all of my audio. So sorry, Roll20, I can't demonstrate it. But anyway, that is a thing, and I recommend you check it out. So that's it. I hope that this was helpful and gave you guys some insights into what's new with Moulinette. Really love this as a tool, as a creator, and for someone who, is always trying to help my Patreons, make sense of their lives as a DM myself. This is just a great tool that I use myself. So let me know in the comments if I missed anything, if there's a feature about Moulinette that you really like that I didn't touch on. And if you have any questions for Sven, the developer of Moulinette, if there's features that you'd like to see, that sort of thing. He's quite responsive and always interested in what can build value for the community. And with that, thanks everybody. And until I talk to you next time, have fun making your maps.